Welcome to Love Lies Chronicles.
I'd really appreciate your comment. It helps me understand if you enjoyed the story and how I can improve in future ones. I was knocking red clay off my boots in the entryway when the door swung wide like it belonged to a stagehand. I'm Ethan Cole, 38, logistics manager for a regional freight company in Tulsa, and I'd just finished another 12-hour day rerouting trucks around a thunderstorm that parked itself on I-44. The house smelled like pan-seared chicken and lemon cleaner. I'd eaten alone, stacked the plates to dry, and left the porch door cracked to pull the humidity through. It was quiet, the kind of honest quiet you don't notice until you've gone a month without it. Then she stepped inside, designer weekender slung on one shoulder, bracelet catching the kitchen light, and said without looking at me, "I'm here, be grateful." I smiled. Not the make-nice smile I used to offer when she came home tense, but the one that meant I understood exactly where we were. "I am," I said, voice steady. "Now you can pack the rest of your things." Her face dropped into silence. Somewhere under the thud of my boots against the mat, I heard the story changing tempo. I didn't gloat. I just watched the script she brought home from wherever she'd been start to crumble against a reality that no longer needed her approval to stand. This moment didn't materialize out of nowhere. For weeks, she'd been returning from places with names that promised rebirth. Breathwork Studios, Goddess Circles, a self-worth retreat. In Santa Fe that cost more than our last anniversary trip. She didn't come back renewed. She came back superior. New vocabulary, too. Partnership became alignment. Conversation became holding space. My steady job got rebranded as scarcity thinking. I'd ask how her day went, and she'd tilt her head like a therapist and say, "Why do you need constant validation?" I stopped asking. Little changes started to feel like policy. Her phone, once abandoned face up on the coffee table, lived in her palm now, always angled away, lit up by names I never heard out loud. She put passcodes on things that had never required them. Our streaming accounts, the shared calendar, the family tablet we used to look up recipes and weekend hikes. When I mentioned it, she called me controlling and suggested we each maintain healthy privacy. The next morning, I set up two-factor authentication on the important accounts and moved our insurance forms, titles, and my mother's jewelry into the small fireproof safe in my office closet. The disrespect didn't arrive like a bolt, it leaked in. A dinner with friends where my gift, a set of hand-thrown mugs from a local artisan, earned an eye roll and the comment, "He loves practical." It's his whole personality. A Sunday morning where she announced she needed the living room for movement and asked me to stop breathing so loud in my own house. A Tuesday night where she stood in the doorway and told me my shirt telegraphed small energy. She used to tease in a way that felt like home. This was different. This was theater for an invisible audience. Her mother started texting more. Not to me, of course, just to her, and within earshot. "You settled too young. A man should lead with ambition. Be careful, or you'll wake up 40 and stuck." I'd catch fragments while I scraped the cast iron pan or folded the towel she left in the dryer for days. I learned to let other people's opinions stay with the people who paid for them. I work with schedules and risk for a living. You see a lot when your job is moving other people's priorities from one place to another. The same part of me that can read a week's worth of weather and know where the drivers will start cutting corners began mapping our marriage. Fights followed a loop. She'd provoke. I'd try to understand. She'd escalate, then accuse me of making everything heavy. When I stopped reacting, she'd go cold, and when I stayed calm, she called it manipulation. If you don't know your worth, someone else will price you at convenience. It took me longer than I like to admit to see that. I made small corrections. I stopped planning double-booked weekends in the hope she'd remember what we used to enjoy. I canceled the subscription box she never opened, but complained about if the package was late. I started drinking my coffee on the back steps before dawn, watching the semi-headlights streak the highway in the distance, reminding myself that steady isn't the same as stuck. I changed my emergency contact at work from her to my brother. Quiet shifts. No ceremony. When she announced she'd be gone 4 days for the retreat, she said it like a favor she was doing me. "You'll have space to think," she told me, tossing workout clothes into a bag. I made her a turkey sandwich for the flight and left a post-it on the counter with the number of our plumber in case the sink acted up again. She didn't take the sandwich. The note was still there when I got home that night, unopened mail pressed beneath it like a second layer of indifference. While she was gone, the house exhaled. I didn't touch her things. I cleaned the stovetop with barkeeper's friend, tightened the porch light that had been flickering for months, and finally replaced the cracked rubber on the washing machine door that left clothes smelling like a lake. I slept hard and woke before my alarm, body remembering what it felt. On the second evening, I sat at the kitchen table and opened a new spreadsheet, not to tally grievances, just to list what was mine to control. Finances, boundaries, what I'd accept, what I wouldn't. She texted pictures from a Red Rock trail and a smoothie bowl with edible flowers. The captions were quotes. A woman does not need permission to rise. Don't let a small man shrink your trajectory. I sent back a thumbs up and a picture of our dog asleep on the rug, belly up to the world. No argument in that. The airport drop-off wasn't warm. She came home late, sunburned in a way that would ache by morning, and set her bag down. I'm here, be grateful, she said to the room, to the idea of me. I wasn't expecting tenderness, but the transactional tone still landed with a dull thud. Maybe she thought I'd rush over, take the bag, ask breathless questions about her growth. Maybe the point was to make me smaller so her new language had something to stand on. It doesn't matter. The sentence had an answer built into it, and I gave it to her. I am, I said, meeting her eyes. Now you can pack the rest of your things. Not a threat or an ultimatum. A simple statement of a simple truth. Respect had left this house weeks before her plane did. The moment stretched. The bracelet stopped glittering. The bag strap slipped from her shoulder and thumped the hardwood in a way that let us both hear a future closing. People imagine these moments as explosions. Mine arrived like a door finally clicking into place after months of being almost shut. I felt aligned with the facts. I had loved a version of her that didn't talk to me like an audience. I had built a life where steadiness wasn't an insult. I wasn't angry at the teachers who gave her new words. I was done renting a home to them inside my kitchen. Something was off, yes, but not in me. The imbalance was simply visible now. She blinked. I waited. Outside, a truck downshifted on the overpass, brakes singing the way steel sings when its shoulders weight it was designed to carry. I thought of my drivers pushing through weather and miles, of routes that end because they're supposed to, not because someone gets dramatic about scenery. You get cargo where it needs to go, or you admit it's headed somewhere else. There's a kind of honesty in both. Welcome home, I said, and stepped aside from the entryway so the space around us could tell the truth I no longer had to. Her face stayed empty for a beat after my line in the doorway. Then the old choreography returned. Chin high, breath through the nose, eyes scanning the room for a stage. She rolled the suitcase to the bedroom like nothing had been said and left the door open a precise 6 inches, just enough to prove she didn't care if I watched her not packing. The air smelled like travel perfume and hotel detergent. I waited in the kitchen, arms loose at my sides, letting the quiet mark the floor between us. The pressure came as drafts through cracks she'd already made. Later that night, she started a discussion about resetting expectations, which was mostly bullet points about all the ways I had limited her growth without noticing. I listened until the cadence hit the part where I usually explain myself. 2 questions, level tone, what's going on? Is there someone else? She smiled like a teacher pleased I'd remembered to raise my hand, and replied with philosophy instead of facts. Energy, expansion, the cost of smallness. No names or answers. The next morning, she texted me an article about radical autonomy in long-term partnership, then asked if I could send her our joint credit card number because she'd left her wallet in the yoga bag. I sent a photo of the card already in her purse by the front door. No commentary. She didn't respond. Her mother called that night and kept her on speaker, loud enough that the words carried down the hall while I folded laundry. You should be more ambitious. You need someone who commands a room. Be careful, darling. Life passes while you're being polite. I paired socks in clean stacks, the way you do when there's nothing productive to say. My silence wasn't confusion anymore. It was a choice to stop renting space to other people's projections. Friday, she wanted a double date with her girls' circle friend and the friend's bearded musician. The restaurant was the kind where every chair is slightly uncomfortable on purpose. She asked the server if the steak was ethically raised and gave the bearded guy the kind of attention you use when you're test marketing new behavior. I focused on my plate, listened more than I spoke, and waited to see if she'd go for the public dig. When the musician asked what I do, she cut in with a laugh. He moves boxes around. He's steady. He likes rules. The table chuckled on cue. I took a breath, then one sentence, even tone. Rules keep people safe when the weather turns. The musician nodded like he'd been caught off guard by something practical. She avoided my eyes for the rest of the entree. Back home, she accused me of embarrassing her by weaponizing calm. That phrase will probably be on a podcast next month. She asked why I couldn't just be supportive of her momentum. The truth surfaced without heat. I am supportive of growth. I'm not signing up to be the villain in a story you're telling for applause. She stared past me, blinking like a lens adjusting to the light, then announced she was sleeping in the bedroom alone for sacred rest. The guest room already had clean sheets. Saturday, I watched a football game with the sound low and a notebook open beside me with 3 lines on it. What I control. What I accept. What ends. Not a list of hers. A list of mine. She drifted in and out, barefoot and performative, doing lunges that seemed designed to be seen. At halftime, she perched on the arm of the couch and asked if we could agree to a trial separation that kept our shared lifestyle intact. I asked what that meant in numbers. She wanted to keep the card for necessary purchases and the car most days, because the universe rewards decisive women. I said the universe also respects clear accounting. No yelling followed. Just the usual flurry of texts to her friends in the kitchen, punctuated by airless laughter. Sunday, she announced a brunch with those same friends, the ones who speak like a panel. I went to the hardware store instead. On the way back, a ping from our account flagged a purchase. Lingerie she had ordered through my Amazon login, delivered to a locker across town. The irony made me smile in the car. I canceled the autofill on the account and changed nothing else. I trust the red lights to be red. I don't run them to prove they work. That evening I tried again, blunt this time. The questions were simple, because simple is kind. Are you done with this marriage? Are you testing to see how far I'd bend? She picked door 3. She was on a journey and needed me to be a container big enough for her evolution. I pictured a shipping crate, dimensions, weight, declared contents. Journeys are easier to move when they're honest about what's inside. I said I don't hold what insults me. The week turned into tests. She texted at midnight from the driveway asking me to open the door because her hands were full, then scolded me for taking too long when I reached it in 20 seconds. She left a note on the fridge instructing me to pick up oat milk because she was de-planning from domestic tasks, then posted a photo of a $38 latte with a caption about ease. She asked if I could take her car in for service. I booked the appointment under her name and left the keys and the reminder card on the counter. The pressure built because my reactions stopped supplying oxygen. When I didn't argue, the next action had to be louder to feel like movement. After I came home from a late shift rerouting trucks around a wreck, I found her at the dining table with 2 of her retreat friends. They hushed when I walked in and then performed kindness at me for 10 minutes. "We are all just trying our best," someone said. "You have to let her be free." I rinsed my hands at the sink and answered only the last sentence. Freedom works both ways. They left quickly, consolation scarves floating behind them like white flags no one intended to wave. The last night before the shift I knew was coming, she tried a softer version of the cycle. She slid onto the couch, leaned her head on my shoulder like she remembered who used to live here, and asked if I could book a weekend at a hot springs retreat 2 months out. As a reset, I turned off the TV and let the silence do the heavy lifting before I used words. A reset requires 2 people who want to reset. Do you? She looked at my hands instead of my face and murmured that she didn't know, but she didn't want to lose access to the life we'd built just because she needed to try on a bigger one. I nodded once. That night, I slept in the guest room again, not from anger, but to hear myself think. I set my phone to alert me if the joint account dipped below a number I could accept without resentment. I stacked the mail by category and found a flyer from a family law firm in the mix of coupons and menus. Proof that the universe has a sense of humor, or that someone had been shopping for exits. I placed it in a drawer without drama. In the morning, I brewed coffee, wrote down exactly 3 sentences about what I expect in a marriage: respect, transparency, mutual decisions, and slid the paper under a magnet on the fridge. No commentary. The note wasn't for her. It was a mirror for me. The pressure had done its job. It revealed load-bearing realities and the cracks that pretend to be doors. By the time I locked the front door and headed to the yard to brush the dew off the toolbox, I knew something I hadn't admitted out loud yet. More talking wouldn't change the geometry. You can't negotiate with gravity. You choose whether to stand where the ground still holds. And when you finally see the fault line, you don't stomp to prove you're strong. You step over it, calmly, deliberately, before the whole thing gives way. Morning made everything simple. I brewed coffee, wiped the counter dry, and laid one page beside the mug like a bill of lading. I titled it what I title every load worth moving. Terms. 3 lines, exactly what I'd taped to the fridge days earlier, posted now as a contract with a clock. Respect. Transparency. Joint decisions. Below that, the consequence that turns talk into structure. 72 hours from 8 a.m. today. Full return to the marriage on these terms, or complete separation. No partials or trial runs. I didn't dress the words up. Men in my line of work know paperwork only matters if it travels with the freight. I set my watch on the island, second hand ticking like a metronome, and waited for her bare feet on hardwood. She came in wrapped in a robe, scrolling with one thumb, the other hand fishing for granola. I slid the paper toward her and spoke the way I'd speak to a driver before a weather line. Steady, specific, kindly firm. This is what I will live with. This is what I won't. The clock starts now. She laughed first, automatic, dismissive, then realized there wasn't any place for that sound to go. You're giving me an ultimatum? I sipped, nodded. I'm giving myself one. Day 1 moved. I redirected my direct deposit to my personal account and lowered the limit on our joint card to cover utilities and groceries only. I removed her as an authorized user on 2 vendor lines that were never meant for lifestyle experiments, then filed a simple written notice to the bank that no transfers over a set amount could process without both signatures. My attorney, whose number I'd had for a week and a half, slotted me into a lunch consult. My financial planner took my call at 4:10 and told me my balance sheet looked like a person who'd gone from hoping to deciding. I kept copies of everything in the safe and in a cloud folder with a boring name. I told no one but my brother. Loose lips don't sink ships. They invite spectators. She tested the perimeter before noon. You're overreacting, she said, standing at the sink like I was a subordinate who had misunderstood a memo. I kept my tone level. I'm responding. She asked if she could keep the joint card for wellness essentials. I pointed at the paper. Joint decisions. She tried a softer angle, chin down, voice airy. So, if I agree to respect, what does that even mean to you? I didn't give her an essay. No contempt. No audience. No secrets with price tags. She blinked because she did. At 3 p.m., I took photos of the house inventory that actually matters in court. Furniture, art, the tools in the garage, serial numbers visible. I labeled a banker's box in the hallway her, immediate, and put inside what she'd asked me to store till later over the last month. Yoga straps, a denim jacket, 2 books on feminine power, and a ring dish she no longer used. It wasn't a threat. It was logistics. Things either have a destination or they become clutter that makes everyone trip. She ramped up that evening, right on time for the part of the cycle where my old self used to come running with explanations. She asked if love meant letting her grow without timelines. I said love means setting a timeline when you keep growing away. She tried the mother route, phone on speaker, phrases about ambition drifting in like commercial jingles. I muted a basketball game and repeated the terms once to both of them. 72 hours. Full return or finish it clean. Laying a line on a map looks cruel until you realize it prevents a wreck. Day 2 started with a performative apology and a request to discuss the energy around money. I offered clarity instead. Money is just math. Respect is the thing with temperature. I sent her a PDF of the budget I'd run for 2 scenarios, stay or separate, each with the same columns. She accused me of planning to fail. I told her planning is how grown men avoid failing the loud way later. At lunch, I signed a limited retainer. At 2:30, I moved the title copies and insurance documents into a labeled folder. If separation. My attorney's paralegal highlighted a section about documentation of effort. I had more than enough. By late afternoon, she tried a seduction I remembered from the early years. Long sleeves pushed to the elbow, bare feet crossing the kitchen, a laugh that used to be for me. It landed on my chest like nostalgia instead of truth. I set my palm flat on the island and shook my head once. Don't negotiate with a mirror. She flushed and went to the bedroom, the same 6 inches of door left open like an alibi. That night, I put a deadline on the wall calendar because clocks talk to me and calendars talk to her. A red line from Friday 8 a.m. to Monday 8 a.m., boxed and clean, the way I mark storm windows for drivers. I slept in the guest room again, not as punishment, but as signal. We weren't play-acting roommates while pretending we had a marriage under the same roof. My phone face down, ringer off. Day 3 brought the predictable circle of friends at the dining table, each one trying on their own version of concern. "You're making her feel unsafe," one said, bracelet chiming against glass. I poured water and answered without heat. "Safety without honesty is a hotel, not a home." The bearded musician attempted diplomacy. "Man to man, why not give it more time?" "Because delay is a decision dressed in sweatpants," I said. At 5 p.m., 47 hours in, I went for a run. The air felt heavy, the kind that smells like rain even when the forecast says clear. Sometimes you can't see the front line, but your skin knows it's there. I don't outrun problems. I log distances and let my decisions catch up with my heartbeat. When I came back, she was sitting on the couch with a notebook open and the look of someone writing a persuasive essay. She gestured like a professor about to grade me. "I can commit to transparency, but not to consulting you on every decision. That's control." I sat across from her, elbows on knees, and let the quiet spool out until it held its own shape. "Then choose separation. I won't live inside a word you can redefine every time a friend sends a new link." She cried. Finally, not the hot tears of anger, but the thin ones people get when they've reached the end of their preferred script. I handed her a tissue and didn't reach for more. Grief isn't a negotiation tactic. It's a weather report. You note it. You drive accordingly. You don't pretend you're dry. Hour 61, she asked what full return would look like in steps. I gave her 3. Stop the public performance, shut down the secret channels, and decide with me like the house belongs to both of us, or move your name off the lease. "And intimacy?" she asked, soft like the end of a song. "Respect first," I said. "The rest follows, or it doesn't." I spent the last hours doing what men do when the point is made and the outcome will reveal itself. Small work with big meaning. I sharpened the kitchen knives, tightened the wobble in the dining chair she's always hated, cleaned the lint trap like I was removing the fuzz of a year I wouldn't carry forward. At 7:55 Monday, I set the watch on the counter again and listened to the click. She stood by the window with her arms folded, eyes on the street like a rescue might arrive. 8. I said, not unkindly. She nodded once and asked if we could talk. "We did," I said. "Now we decide." The second hand kept moving. Clocks don't argue. They measure. And a measured man, finally, stops playing. 8 o'clock turned into a mirror. When the second hand lined up, she didn't choose the marriage. She asked for another conversation. I repeated the terms that had been on the counter for 3 days and pointed to the clock that had been on the wall for 5 years. Choices are louder than debates. Mine was separation. The first hour after that made the playbook predictable. Guilt came first. I was cold, abandoning her, weaponizing structure. I let the words pass. I offered the plan I'd built. I'd cover the mortgage through the end of the month, utilities through the billing cycle, and her immediate belongings would be boxed and labeled by room. Joint cards set to necessities only. Titles and serial numbers documented. She hovered over the paper like it might bite and asked where love was in all this. In telling the truth early instead of late, I said, and left it there. Seduction arrived by noon. The familiar lilt in her voice, the hands that used to carry meaning. She suggested a weekend away to reconnect before deciding. That's how gamblers walk past the exit and back to the table. I told her the door works both ways, and this was me using it. The look she gave me wasn't heartbreak. It was surprise that the script didn't pull me back on stage. Blame followed. "You pushed me to this. You made me feel small." I gave one sentence in a level tone. "You told me what you wanted the house to be. I believed you." She tried a new angle. If I had been more ambitious, more spontaneous, more something. The inventory didn't move me. Men who move freight learn this early. If the destination keeps changing names, the cargo spoils on the dock. By late afternoon, panic made its entrance. A flurry of calls to friends, then to her mother. The speakerphone went on without asking me, advice spilling out like commercials between songs. One phrase surfaced: "Don't let him bully you with deadlines." Deadlines are how bridges get built and flights land without colliding. I don't apologize for using tools that keep people safe. I said nothing and emailed the attorney to initiate the basic filings we discussed. The universe added its own twist. Her retreat mentor, the woman whose quotes had captioned our last month, didn't answer her call. A short message pinged a minute later. Boundaries around personal time. No homestays. Sending love. When she read it, the self-assurance in her shoulders receded a half-inch. You can almost hear it when performance loses its audience. I boxed what she'd asked to store just for a while over the past weeks and set the boxes by the wall. I wasn't punishing. I was making it possible for both of us to walk without tripping. She stood in the doorway and reached for soft words. Can we at least keep this off social media? That part one agreed with before she spoke. I don't crowdsource my life. Still, within an hour, a curated paragraph appeared on her story about embracing freedom from control. I ignored it. Mutual friends didn't. Two of them texted separate versions of the same thing. We remember the restaurant, the jokes, the little humiliations. Narrative doesn't travel well when the audience saw the rehearsal. Her mother trailed, heat in her voice and jewelry that chimed every time a point needed emphasis. This is premature, she said. Marriages have seasons. Her father cut in gently, eyes on his daughter. A season has a calendar. He gave you one. When we lifted the first box, he didn't ask what was inside. Not his business, not mine anymore either. The financial rails I laid started doing their job. An attempted transfer bounced and triggered a bank call that arrived on speaker while we were in the hallway. The representative asked for both voices to confirm. I gave mine. She hesitated, eyes fast and calculating, then hung up. Money is just math wearing our choices. She tried one last gambit that night. Tears that weren't for show, and a small admission. I thought you'd fight. I sat on the edge of the bench by the door where we keep the dog leash and answered the only way that didn't turn the moment into a negotiation. I did. This is what it looks like when a man fights for himself. She nodded once, not in agreement, but in recognition that words had reached bedrock. Consequences aren't always fireworks. Often they're logistics. The next morning, I changed my emergency contact at work and the passcode to the alarm. I set her mailbox key on the counter and took mine off the ring. She texted that she needed the car 3 days a week to get to work. I sent her the schedule for the rideshare app she'd signed up for last year and never used. Her friends began to sort themselves, the way people do when the spotlight changes. One of them, quiet, married, not a panelist, sent me a message I didn't expect. I told her to stop turning you into a villain. I'm sorry. I thanked her and left it there. Another posted a grainy inspirational quote about wolves and mountains that made no sense. At work, the guys didn't get the full story because they didn't need it. One asked if I was all right. I said I was steady. He nodded and changed the subject to a chassis issue on a truck headed to Amarillo. Useful problems. The kind you can fix with tools and time. By midweek, she had moved into a short-term rental arranged by her mother. Nice enough. Temporary on purpose. The ring dish made it into the box. The ring did not. She took the soft goods, the outfits with tags, the vision board. She left the plant I'd kept alive while she was gone last month. I watered it anyway. Some habits have more to do with who you are than who you're with. There was one more thin attempt at rewriting. A dinner invite from her to close the loop. Closure isn't a restaurant course. It's a choice served without witnesses. I declined and sent her a concise list of remaining items and a window for pickup. She replied with a paragraph about how abruptly I'd changed. The truth, nothing was abrupt. I'd simply stopped negotiating with gravity. People started seeing her without the background music. Her mother left me a voicemail saying I'd regret being so rigid. Maybe. My life has room for that possibility because it isn't crowded with performance anymore. The house got lighter in ways that don't show up on a scale. The chair stopped wobbling after I tightened the bolts last week. The porch light clicked on at dusk without buzzing. I cooked, ate, cleaned, and slept like a man who'd stopped bracing for a sound. I wasn't grieving for a future that had already told me it was leaving. One evening, the delivery locker sent an auto reminder about a package she'd ordered on my account weeks back. The reset, lingerie, ignored since. I smiled, pressed, return to sender, and deleted the app as a sign that symbols don't run my life when the facts already do. She texted late the following night. Not a paragraph. Just, I don't like how this feels. I put the phone face down on the table and watched the second hand finish its lap. The game had collapsed under its own weight, and I wasn't the scaffolding anymore. People finally saw what had been true for months. So did she. And that was the point, to step out of the theater and let the stage belong to whoever still needed it. The morning after her last text, the town moved like it always does. School buses, coffee lines, a sky that couldn't be bothered by human paperwork. I printed the separation packet, stacked it square, and drove to the courthouse with the radio off. There's a kind of peace in forms that ask for facts and nothing else. Dates, addresses, signatures that admit what words have failed for months to make stick. I signed where my name belonged and left the clerk with copies that felt lighter than they looked. The sound of my boots on tile and the relief of finally matching action to truth. Back home, I did the small work that keeps a man anchored. I swapped the guest room into a weight rack and a drafting table I'd always said I didn't have room for. The bedroom stayed a bedroom, not an altar to a memory. I pulled her leftover shampoo from the shower caddy and set it in a grocery bag with the last items she'd forgotten. 2 candles, a silk scarf, a bracelet with a cracked clasp. I labeled the bag with a date and slid it into the hall closet. Logistics without emotion. Respect for what was, but respect first for what is. I called the utility companies to split accounts, set up a calendar reminder for the mortgage payment cycle I'd already committed to cover, and emailed her the simple spreadsheet that showed who's responsible for what until the decree lands. 1 page. No adjectives. She replied with 3 sentences. Appreciation for the clarity, a suggestion for future conversations about growth, and a question about whether we might try counseling after a cooling-off period. I read it twice, not to savor it, but to make sure my answer was the same in my bones as it was on the screen. I wrote back 1 line. We already did the work called honesty. This is me keeping it. The house got predictably quieter, and not in a lonely way. I found rhythms I hadn't noticed were mine. Coffee on the steps before sunrise, the dog's predictable stretch and sneeze, a jog past the river where trucks thrum across the overpass, and my chest echoes the same steady meter. There's an ease in living at your own pace that no retreat teaches. People adjusted too. My brother swung by with a torque wrench and a 6-pack and kept conversation on engines until the evening dissolved into laughter about a job site calamity from years back. A neighbor waved more openly than before, the kind of kindness people extend when they sense you've stopped apologizing for existing in your own home. At work, the crew followed my lead. No gossip, just routes and weather windows. A new driver asked if I was going through something. I told him I'd finished going through it. Word gets around without your help. A mutual friend texted me a photo of an outdoor concert I used to skip because she hated waiting in line. He said I looked lighter the last time we talked, then stopped himself like he was afraid of trespassing into a personal field. I told him he was right. It's not that I'm happy, it's that my life fits again. He sent a thumbs up and a dumb meme about forklifts. That's how men say I see you without making a ceremony of it. There were last ripples, of course. She sent a longer email one night about the past, about moments she missed already, about how our story didn't have to end like this. The subject line read, closure, which is a word people use when they mean repeat everything with different punctuation. I let it sit until morning, read it under natural light, and answered with the same mercy I'd want from someone else. I don't hate you. I'm not punishing you. I'm protecting the only person I'm responsible for being. Then I added the only boundary that counts, future contact limited to logistics. I muted the thread and slept 12 hours for the first time in 2 years. I finished the retitling on the car and refinanced the house in my name alone. The bank manager shook my hand and said the paperwork was clean. Clean is underrated. Clean is what you notice when the theatrics end. I hung a new porch light and watched it click on at dusk without buzzing. I bought a plant I knew I'd keep alive, not to prove anything, but because living things deserve consistency more than promises. I gave the standing mixer to a coworker's daughter who bakes for school fundraisers. Not out of pettiness, out of alignment. If something isn't used, it belongs with someone who will make it sing. She did try once more to pivot the narrative, an invitation to coffee framed as 2 adults reflecting. Adults reflect by their choices, not by crafting a post-mortem they can audition in front of their circles. I declined with 5 words, wishing you peace. She responded with a single period, which told me everything about the audience she wanted and didn't get. I won't pretend there wasn't an ache. There's always a cost to closing a door, even one that's been slamming on your fingers for months. The difference now is that the ache passes through me. It doesn't anchor me. A man can respect his history without living in its guest room. I keep the few photos that still tell the truth. Two people at a lake smiling into wind that doesn't care who's right, and I store the rest in a box for the city's next recycling day. Weeks later, someone mentioned she'd moved across town into a smaller place with north-facing windows and a lot of empty white walls. I felt nothing sharp, just the kind of quiet you get after a storm, when the air tastes scrubbed and the ground holds. I don't hope she suffers. I hope she learns the same lesson I did. You can't build anything on contempt, not even a performance. If there's a moral here, it's smaller than a speech. I stopped volunteering to lose. Respect isn't a perk or a prize. It's the threshold you refuse to step below, even when that means stepping away. I'll keep my house, my routes, my dawn coffee, my dog who trusts the world enough to show his belly on the rug. And when the porch light snaps on each evening like a promise kept, I remember the one sentence that finally made my life fit again. My worth is not up for debate. The door that closes on disrespect opens to everything else I was too busy explaining to notice.
Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments, and do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel.